All right, what's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to the DenofTruth. I got my boy Franco with me. Franco, how you doing?
What's up, man? I'm good.
I'm good. Oh man, how you been?
Really good. Busy. Just got back from London last week, and yeah.
Oh, what were you doing in London? How's London?
It was good. It was good. I was there for the first showcase of the company I work for, Future Classic. We've done like a global event series, and we launched it in London.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we had one of our artists who goes by the name of G Flip performing her first London headline show.
Yeah.
Which was amazing and sold out in a real moment for her in Europe.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, just lots of meetings.
Yeah,
with our
get down
partners
to
and people I work with over there who I just don't get in the room with often.
Yeah.
So it's just about having that FaceTime and kind of keeping things moving.
Well, that's crazy. I mean, so just on a personal level, how did you get into artist management? You know, obviously, because now you're talking about Future Classic and your progression, and now being in London and doing what you're doing. So how was the journey? So how did you start? Because I know you grew up in the eastern suburbs. So how did you start? What were some of your early influences?
So yeah, I grew up in Sydney in the eastern suburbs. Young adolescent life, I was a skateboarder. Completely obsessed with skateboarding and into hip hop music.
Yeah.
Sort of when skateboarding, I guess, finished for me, like when I was in my late teens and kind of realized this wasn't going to be my career path, I started DJing.
Yeah.
And then when I was around 21, I, to be honest, wasn't really doing a whole lot with my life. I was kind of working in retail and didn't really have much direction. Learning to DJ and kind of like getting into club life and really interested in different sounds from all over the world. And then like met a girl and she moved to London and I was like, oh, I'm not doing much. So I had some friends who lived over there. I was like, I'm going to try live in London. So I moved over to London in early 2000s and not long after school, and I lived there for nearly 5 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
I was just DJing, and my father's French, so I got a French passport, so I was able to stay there for a while. Yeah. And when I got there, I was just literally working in retail, but wanting to work in music. And started DJing more and more, and then quit the retail job and was literally just DJing full time. Yeah. And then I got a job for like an events company, essentially. We used to do like experiential marketing for brands in the music space. Yeah. So whoever like Marlboro or like some big corporate brand would come to us and go, hey, we're putting on like a show at a festival, go and book all the talent and then help us market the event and get a lot of cool people there. And so essentially we're putting on like events and booking artists. Yeah. So it was kind of like a booking company and marketing company. It was like an agency that just did a bit of everything. Yeah. Rolled into one. I did that for 2 years and finished up there. It was a really small company. It was me and another guy who was my boss. Yeah. The owner of the company. Just you two, And then we'd have like an intern. Yeah. We'd work out of his apartment sometimes. It was like really DIY. Yeah. But I just sort of left there going, I want to work in music full time. And I wasn't really sure what the path to that was. And then years later, I finished up there, spent another year just DJing in London, and then just came home for a summer and was like, it's pretty good in Sydney in summer. After like 5 London winters, I was like,
can't do it anymore.
So moved back to Sydney and got a job working for a company called 3D World, which is a street press. Yeah. And very like dance music based sort of street press that they used to give out in retail stores and music stores and cafes and whatever. And it'd be like interviews with artists, gigs going on every week. And I was, at that point, I just moved back to Sydney and started DJing quite heavily again. Yeah, full time, but like kind of started to really build like the community of like my DJ community. So I was started by running a night called Dynamite, which was essentially inspired by soul jazz records, and it was reggae, dancehall, rocksteady, like sounds coming out of the Caribbean. Yeah. Because I was really heavily influenced by that, and also being a hip hop DJ before that, living in London, I was just exposed
that
to
vibe,
all these vibes. Like I went there as a hip hop DJ and I left playing more like funk, soul, reggae, dancehall, hip hop, like kind of everything. So I ran that night for 2 years and was working at this magazine. And that night was, people really took to it because it was kind of nothing like it in Sydney. Yeah. And then that ended. And towards the end of that ending, I met a couple of other DJs and I guess the conversation was like, you know what? I'd love to do a hip hop night in Sydney.
Yeah.
But at the time, every hip hop night in Sydney was sort of just playing like the 90s boom bap.
It wasn't there.
Classics.
Yeah.
It was like you'd go out, you'd hear Puck, you'd hear Biggie, you'd hear like that
old school. It wasn't
old
progressive.
School kind of stuff. And which I loved and I played for years, but there was something new happening.
Yeah.
And I just was interested by it. And Levins and another guy called Spruce Lee, who I did it with, they were, to be honest, they were way more progressive than me musically, because I was still kind of like had this like East Coast rap,
old school boom bap,
like East Coast and West Coast kind of mentality. But the sounds of the South was very new to me, and I kind of hadn't really been exposed to it that much.
Yeah.
But I'd heard stuff like the Ludacris's or the Lil Wayne's, and I was like, this is super interesting. Like, this doesn't sound like anything I grew up on, but I like what it is, you know. And so we'd started playing a lot of that stuff out, and then we were like, we should run this party. And so we started this party called Halfway Crooks.
So this is what I wanted to ask you about. So you started the party, Halfway Crooks.
Yeah.
How was Sydney like before the lockouts? Do you think if you ran it now, you could be successful?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, the thing is like when it started, there was nothing like it.
Yeah.
So, and I think, I'm not a youngish guy anymore.
yeah. You
I
can't do it
really
anymore.
nicely. But then I was really connected to this scene of like other DJs, kids who went out partying. I was really like just completely engulfed myself in this scene.
Yeah.
So I think people came in the initial phase of that party. People came because it was a new party.
Yeah.
And it was exciting.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it was full of like hot, young like dudes and women who just wanted to party. And people came more for the vibe than they did for the music or what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
And then as years went past, it was like, oh wait, we're actually like breaking these records. Like we were probably like the first party to play Drake in Australia. You know what I mean?
Like, at that time, you guys were doing.
There was like artists where we were like, oh man, what about this? And we would play something that no one had ever heard before.
Yeah.
Like Travis Scott. Like I remember when Travis Scott like first came out and he was signed to T.I. and he was like dropping these records. We were like,
who is this guy?
We were like, I don't know what this is. Like he kind of sounded like he was like trying to do like a B-side Kanye.
Yeah.
But then you found out
but
that
like
he was kind of producing for Kanye.
Exactly,
and you were like,
exactly.
What is this? And it was just interesting. And then like, I think the turning point for him was like that record Antidote. And we'd play it and you'd see it play at one party and it had come out on the Wednesday.
Yeah.
We played it on the Saturday. Everyone sung along to it. And you're like, no, this is
it.
This is like people are so receptive to this music.
That reminds me of what the Salty guys are doing now with Stanley, Ike, Trav, Reese. What they're doing now, it's like one thing that I noticed is because obviously I'm their mate, so I can look at everything from a neutral perspective, and I see what they're trying to do. And it's like they're creating a vibe in Sydney. It reminds me of what you're talking about, is that people are so receptive to a vibe, especially now with the Sydney culture. You have so many different artists, like, for you guys are managing Jada Woods, B Wise, but then you have the Manus, then you have the Kwame's, and then you have, Flume doing his thing over in a different genre. Yeah. Then you have Sampa doing her thing. So there's so many different artists and there's so many different things that I think. That's why I think DJs and these events are extremely important. Because you break it to everyone else. Totally. It's like, I went in there, I went to Saudi, and they were playing some Kidda Kuds. And then I swear, no one knew Kidda Kuds that I knew in Sydney. The next week, next week, dropped the song and everyone was singing to it. Yeah. And it just shows you the importance of, at that time, why you need a DJ, why you need events, why you need people who put in that work just for the culture.
I love what those guys are doing. And I tell those guys too, like proper fanboy style, because I'm like, I've only been to a few parties.
Yeah.
And they all know there's a few times I rocked up and couldn't get in, and I couldn't even pull those favors.
Yeah.
But I was like, guys,
that's a lie, man.
I'm in the line. Come on, I never line up.
Yeah.
But, like when I go in there, it gives me that feeling of what Halfway Crooks was when we started, because I hear like new Afrobeat sounds, new grime and drill coming out of the UK.
Yeah.
But then the thing that they've been able to do that we could never do was they're actually playing local artists.
That's the thing.
And it rings off in the club.
Yeah.
Like whether it's like 1-4 or like the Manu Wise Throw It Back song. Like when those horns come in, the whole place goes nuts. And to be honest, as someone who's worked with B-Wise for years, who makes records that can work in the club, but not like club records as such, that song, seeing the reaction to that song in the club and videos of it in the club is like massively inspiring, because the UK, the US obviously is like the home of where hip hop came from.
Yeah.
You know, you go to a club, they play every club hit.
Yeah.
Here, it was something that like was never done.
Yeah.
Like you play an Aussie rapper, and people should be like, nah, fam.
This ain't it. Yeah, this ain't it. Yeah.
But the face and the sound of hip hop is changing.
Yeah.
And what the kids are into now is like, now they're growing up with that. So now they're like, but that's what we know.
Yeah, most definitely.
Why should we?
Because I think a lot of it also has to do with now, like, rap music is the mainstream.
Totally. It's
like hip hop, rap music is the mainstream. Like you have so many different people now from different cultures, and then look at Sydney. This is probably one of the most multicultural places in the world, where you can live next to, you know, an African guy, a Scottish guy, you know, a Middle Eastern guy, all in the same street, and you grow up together, and you don't even know the difference.
Yeah.
You know, and then now you have people listening to different rap music. You know, it's such an interesting time. That's why I think now is the time. Now is the time for everyone to put in a lot of effort, focus on the craft, and really try to help others. So what do you think really caused that? Like, what, in your opinion, what do you think caused that boom in Australian music?
I think it's, like Australian music as like an export culture generally. Yeah. Like obviously you mentioned like Flume and other artists I work with. Before I was at Future Classic, I was at EMI as a marketing manager. I worked with like Alice in Wonderland and a bunch of acts who've like completely broken internationally. Yeah. But I think what's really interesting now, and you know, part of when I first started working with Wise, something that, and I don't want to make this all about like B-Wise or artists I work with. But one of the things I thought was really interesting was, you know, he's a guy who's like father's Nigerian, his mum's from rural Australia, grew up in Sydney for the most part, but then spent time in like rural Australia or back in Nigeria, or, you know, and I think whether you're white, Asian, you know, black, whatever, like wherever you come from, it's like, I think now Australia is very much made up of people who tell a different story.
That's it.
And I think it's like that story for a lot of people is like, I didn't grow up in a traditional household of like the white picket fence. Yeah. You know, like
everyone's got a different story.
And a dog and 3 kids, and like everyone's story is different now. And as the culture and as the country becomes more multicultural, so does the culture, and so does the art that goes with it. And whether that's music or fine art or, you know, theatre or writers or whatever, like there are people telling different stories. Yeah,
and I think that's the, and whenever people ask me why did I start the DenofTruth, that's literally why I started it, because I feel now, especially growing up in West Sydney, and I see all the flavours. I see, you know, different cultures and immigrants, and I get to see it all like firsthand. And one thing that I find amazing is that if you talk to an American artist, they can tell you a story, whether they're from LA, whether they're from New York, whether they're from the South. They have a story, they have a lineage. Now when you go to Europe, when you go to London, and you ask these UK rappers, can you tell me your story? Everyone knows their story. You know, but the thing is, Australia has a story. You know, there's a big story there's a big story in Australia, but it just takes. I'm just trying to tell that story. You know what I mean. Totally. So that's the point of the podcast. But it's interesting you said that.
Well, the UK is like such a good reference point for Australia in terms of music, because, like, you know, when I lived in London all those years ago, like, I remember going to like garage nights and like two-step nights, right? And it was mad. It was like something I'd never experienced before. Or like Bashman, like dance hall nights. You know, you're like, where it's all these young kids and there's like kids there who are making this music, but there's also just like a whole generation of people who are like, this is awesome and exciting, you know. But it took a long time for that, like UK rap or UK grime or drill or whatever you want to call it, to cross outside of the UK.
Do you reckon?
It took a long, like, when I was growing up here, and I was listening to like East Coast rap, there would be certain artists from the UK that you would listen to.
Yeah.
But it was just because, I don't know, it was a bit more like straight up and down, like boom bap.
Boom bap, it was rapping. They were just
like,
rapping over it.
There were things that like Roots Maneuver or Thai, whatever, that kind of like fit into the zeitgeist of like what hip hop was at the time.
Yeah.
But then grime came along, and grime was so specifically British.
Yeah.
That it was the same as like trap coming out of Atlanta, or
it's just their thing.
Boom bap rap coming out of New York, or it was their thing.
Yeah.
And that took a long time to export.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it wasn't really, and I could get shot for saying this, but it wasn't really until people like Drake or whoever were like, my man Skepta.
That's what I was going to ask you next. It was the
international cosign.
It was that cosign
that made people like really stand up and take notice
and
outside of the UK.
Yeah, and I'm noticing this a lot with Australian artists, whether that be through entertainment or whether that be music or hosts. I feel like a lot of people are comparing things to American things. Yeah. So, for example, they would see a radio show, oh, that sounds like The Breakfast Club. Or they'll see like, another radio show, that sounds like BBC One Extra. Yeah. You know what I mean? I understand what you're saying, but I also feel as if Australian artists need to be able to create their own thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For it to be a legitimate industry, for it to be an industry where, we flourish for a long period of time, there needs to be an own thing. And like you said, it takes a long period of time for that to happen. But I hate that whole thing where people say, oh, you need that cosign from international artists. I agree with you, because I think that one of the best things that happened to the British music scene was when Skepta went to America. Yeah. Skepta was already doing numbers. Like he was Wizkid, Skepta, all those guys, they already do numbers in different parts of the world. But I feel like coming to America and solidifying your star there, and if it gets appreciated there, then because as much as we want to talk about it, America is the centerpiece of music throughout the world.
Totally.
Everything comes out of America. And now it's probably the one of the first times where we actually see now that you go to some clubs and they're not playing American music, they're just playing music from Europe, music from the UK. That's a very interesting point. It's very interesting.
And that's what I like about like the Saudi guys, like you said, is because they're not like we're a hip hop night.
Yeah.
They're all about like this journey of
different sounds, yeah.
And that's like one thing that with Halfway Crooks or with Dynamite before that, like I was never able to really, like it was kind of stuck in a genre.
Yeah.
I mean like Halfway Crooks, like we both played like a lot of R&B and a lot of dancehall and whatever, but it was generally just like a hip hop and R&B night.
Yeah, yeah.
But I like that they've like, because they've played stuff when I've been there, or like just the stuff they post on their socials, and I'm like, man, what is this? Like there's like amazing new Afrobeat sounds. I'm like, this is incredible.
I mean, they got a lot of good heads on them, and one thing that they do well is that they're getting a lot of young local dudes, like young 18-year-olds. Yeah. There's a bunch of young 18-year-olds from out west who are they're making a lot of good music, but I think what they don't have really is that guidance, because everyone right now is trying to follow that independent music sort of lane. A lot of people don't, but I think following that lane, you realize that it takes a lot of effort. It's not just like you get a manager, whoop, let's do our thing, whoop, whoop. It's a team. It's a big effort. Totally. So for someone who actually works in the industry, someone who works at independent artists, what to you is an independent artist? How would you define that?
I mean, it's the term has a lot of grey areas these days, because people look obviously at like a Chance the Rapper and they go, the ultimate independent artist, never signed a label deal.
Yeah.
But and I don't know this, and I'm but for all we know, like he's getting $1 million from Apple Music to put his stuff specifically on their platform only, or on Spotify or whatever. Yeah. But so does that technically still make him independent? Well, not really, because he's getting funding from somewhere. That's
okay. Yeah.
But he's independent of a label.
Yeah.
Right. Future Classic, we're an independent management company.
Yeah.
And label and publisher.
Okay. Yes.
So we're a multifaceted, like, I guess you could call it like a management services company.
Yeah.
So we work with artists who aren't signed to us for management. We work with artists who aren't signed to us for the label, but we manage.
Yeah.
And same with the publishing side. So I think we're independent because we're independently funded as a company. We're not backed by a major label.
Yeah.
But again, like if you sign, like it's essentially you're an independent artist, but there's still a team behind you. You're not, the term independent doesn't mean you're like a lone wolf.
Yeah.
Because I think that the reality of that is quite unrealistic.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's impossible. It's impossible to do all your marketing, distribution, your managing. You can't do that.
Strategy, like the A&R, like kind of. I mean, you could be a kid in your bedroom making music and write a hit, and tomorrow your career could change.
Yeah.
But once it changes, you need people who know what to do.
Yeah.
Once that change happens,
yeah.
Because otherwise, it's a very tough road. It's a very tough road by yourself. But yeah, it's like, and that's not to say that like signing with a label or doing any sort of deal is right or wrong, but it does, like, there are other avenues these days because of the independent route and because it's really easy to just make your music available on platform
however you want,
like overnight. But that's not to say that that's the right way to do it.
So yeah, so where do you think a lot of artists get wrong? What do you think are some of the biggest problems artists have at the beginning?
I think strategy is one. I think understanding the landscape and the environment is another. We live in in the music world, and people who've worked in the music industry for a long time, it's a constantly changing ecosystem. Yeah. So when I first started working in music, it was all about, hey, how many units can you put of your CD in JB Hi-Fi?
Shit, really? That's man. To be honest with you, I'm gonna tell you the truth. I have not bought a CD in 10 plus years. I'm gonna keep on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how long I've been working.
yeah. Straight up, I haven't done that in a long time.
Yeah. So I think like with that, you got, there's two sides to that coin. It's like challenges and opportunity.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've gone from an ecosystem of you sign to a label who help fund a record.
Yeah.
Once that record is done and dusted, you print it on a vinyl or a CD or a cassette or however far back you want to go.
Yeah.
And then the record label takes that product and they market it. And they market it to stores, to radio, to media, to TV, to whoever. Yeah. Right? And then they sell it.
Yeah.
Now we've gotten to a point where, like I said, like this kid can have what used to cost $100,000 in studio time recording on a reel-to-reel of tape. They can record the way you're recording this podcast through a microphone in their bedroom onto a laptop, mix it, master it, and put it on Spotify and Apple and Amazon and Deezer and all these partners in less than a week.
And get 1 million views.
And get 1 million views on YouTube.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, the possibilities are endless. But with that means that every day the goalposts change.
Yeah. What do you mean by what do you mean by that?
Because say 5 years ago was like the end of the sort of CD era. Yeah. Then iTunes came in as like the downloading music. Yeah. And the whole game was like making people buy downloads. Yeah. Yeah. And that was like the shift in piracy, because what happened was when CDs and vinyl sort of like that game slowed down. Yeah. The piracy era started. So people were like, well, why would I go and buy the record digitally? I got LimeWire.
I could just download
it. Right? So that created the challenge of like, well, how does a record label or a management company or publisher or whatever make money in that era? So then they navigated that with like the download thing worked for a long time, but then they were like, wait a second, subscription.
That's right.
And the subscription-based model was like, well, actually, if you're going to spend 5 hours on LimeWire trying to get the album the day it drops, because you don't want to spend $11 on that CD, what if you could spend $11 a month and have unlimited music?
Change the game up.
Yeah. So suddenly...
And piracy just went all the way down. Now
piracy
it's impossible.
Kind of died.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't died. It still exists.
Yeah.
But like... It slowed down big time because suddenly you're like, you know what? I'm spending hours trying to find these things. It's kind of annoying when I can pay one monthly subscription and then suddenly I can have everything the day it drops.
Exactly.
It's saved directly onto my phone or my device or my laptop or whatever the day it comes out. So again, a few years later, that ecosystem has come into effect.
Yep.
The download now is kind of died.
Yep.
The CDs kind of died. The vinyl weirdly has had a resurgence because people like want to own something because now there's like almost like a backlash to never owning anything. It's like you actually want something tangible.
To hold.
It's like the same in the media landscape. Everything went digital and magazines all died. And now there's like this reverse kind of new world of people going like, you know what? I'm going to publish a magazine once a year and it's going to be like an annual sort of like retrospective of all this cool stuff I've done online because online could be here today, gone tomorrow.
Look, and that's what I reckon is the very interesting part right now. Like you're talking about the LimeWire part was, I feel like that was like the early part of the internet. Like I feel like during that period of time we were on the internet with no rules. No one knew. No one really knew. It's like, it was
the Wild West of
it was like the wild. No one knew Instagram would happen, Facebook would happen. No one knew the consequences, and that's why even Facebook, Instagram, I have a feeling they never thought that their platforms were going to be so big. But at the gates of when they created it, they just thought, okay, let's do this thing. Let's try to connect with our peers, our friends, our environment. If it gets big, it gets big. But they never thought that they'll become such. It's sort of like an ecosystem. Yeah. Instagram, Facebook, such an ecosystem. So it's really interesting when you compare music to different stages. Because now I really realize the importance of, especially when you talk about tangible music. I went overseas to Zimbabwe, and obviously there was no internet reception on the plane. Yeah. I couldn't play any music because all my music was like through subscription. Like I didn't actually I didn't have any music on my phone. It's just through subscription. So if I have no internet connection, I can't listen to music because I don't download it on my phone. And I was just like, wow, this is how they get you.
So like, there's these really interesting stats that have come out about like the resurgence of vinyl.
Yeah.
And I find it like, as someone who like, I learned to DJ on vinyl. So I got like a whole room in my house
of vinyl.
Of vinyl.
Yeah.
But like, to be honest, I love it. I look at it. It looks beautiful. I play records every now and then at home while I'm just hanging out like with my family, whatever. But like, would I ever take it out and DJ? No way. Because I used to break my back every night carrying it. It's like stupidity. So like now the study around like the resurgence of vinyl, people buy it almost like they buy a piece of art. They don't buy it to listen to it most of the time. Like there's some crazy statistics about, they did studies and they interviewed people and they did market research on people who buy vinyl. Yeah. I'm mostly buying it to put on the shelf.
Not even to listen to it.
Not even to listen to it. They just like, I love that artist and I'm going to buy that record to support them. Because like as social media and like culture grows of like people are more invested. Maybe people have like a deeper look behind the curtain of like artists.
That's what it is,
and they're more invested in us. They want to support that artist financially. So if an artist goes, hey, I just released this great album and you could buy it on record, they're like listening to it day one on streaming, but then they want to be like a super fan.
I support this person.
So they buy the record, or they buy like, there's a resurgence in cassettes.
Yeah.
But there's no resurgence in cassette players, just in cassettes. Because people want to own it like a piece of merch. Like you'd buy a t-shirt or hoodie or a beanie or whatever. So it's an interesting time because people now want to feel closer to that artist more so than ever. Mm-hmm. But in a weird way, streaming is kind of the complete opposite of that.
Oh, and that's what it is. Like you said, with social media, you can literally watch an artist from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And you can see exactly what they're doing. And that's where I feel like music is sort of transitioning to, moving away from larger labels, going towards more independent labels. Because now you look at like artists and they just completely brand themselves. Like they just become their own little, like for example, look at one of the examples, like look at Cardi B. Like she has, I don't know who her team is, but her team have completely branded her in a particular way where now she has like super fans. Like look at Rihanna's fans, Beyonce's fans, where you have like fans who will ride or die. Totally. Anything you drop, whether that be a piece of paper, they will go purchase that piece of paper with happiness. Yeah. It's a really interesting concept. And I think that's the way music is starting to transition and moving towards. I think in the near future, I think music labels are really going to die out.
It's an interesting argument.
Yeah.
And from being on both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
And like we are still a label, we do still do record deals.
Yeah.
And I don't think we'll ever stop doing that.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that like with, I guess, so being an independent artist, right, sounds very alluring. Everyone's like, I can do it myself.
Yeah.
But who's paying for the video? Who's paying for the marketing? Who's paying for the like the cover art? Who's paying for the social media like assets?
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
it's true. Someone's got to pay for it.
Someone's got to pay for it.
Yeah.
And if you want to do it all yourself, more power to you.
Yeah.
Like more power to you. But unless you blow up overnight and you're making a lot of money in this streaming ecosystem, or like literally you need to be on the road touring.
Yeah. All the time
to fund that sort of career.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to like, I mean, like unless you're blowing up like ridiculous streaming numbers.
Yeah.
The funding and the financial benefit of those streaming numbers is going to be tough to sustain a career at that level.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's ever a point in time when like the label is completely redundant. I think the way labels do business is changing.
I think that's a better way to describe it. You know, I was talking to one of the homies. He got hit up to get signed by a different artist. And one of the things that he said was, even though the deal sounded really, really good, the mentality that some of these music label executives and A&Rs that they have is completely backwards. And the labels who actually do well are the ones who have that new, more progressive, let's partner with the artist. Let's work on artist development. You know, let me work on, you know, what are you doing during the day? Let's work on your music. How can we get you in the studio with the right people, right producers?
Exactly.
How can we market you on social media? How do you want to be marketed? Rather than let me just get you, let me put you here.
Well, totally.
Yeah, you know.
Well, so like over the era of, you know, the changing of the guards of like, selling a CD or vinyl to like digital downloads to a stream.
Yeah.
I think what happened, there was a real big shift in like the mentality of a label, because originally it was like, we sign this artist, we put on CD, we have good relationships with all the CD stores, and they're going to stock as many units as we need and week one numbers and it'll work.
Yeah, it will do well, yeah.
But once it became like where the user at home has the power to like either physically download or now just stream it. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's a quicker currency exchange.
Oh, most definitely.
And
yeah.
So
yeah.
For the label, you're like, well, how much time do I have to invest in that artist if that exchange doesn't happen quickly?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. From their perspective.
From their perspective.
Yeah.
So the days of like going, oh, okay, this artist has a bit of buzz. Here's a huge amount of money for a really bad royalty.
Yeah.
That artist is more than likely never going to pay off.
Yeah.
Which means they're never going to get a cent from their recordings. I think the power shift has happened where the artist is like, well, no, I've got this influential song, social media, YouTube channel, whatever, and you want it, so you need to pay for it. But you're not going to pay for it the way you used to by giving me a lot of money and taking like all of the royalties.
Yeah.
Now let's partner on it.
Yeah.
Because I've got the power. You can help exploit that power and expose it further, and that's their job.
Yeah.
Like, essentially, like, the job of a label is to exploit recordings in the most, like, stripped down and bare way to describe it.
Yeah.
That is your job. The word exploit, there's a negative connotation to it, but essentially, it's not a negative, like, activity, because that's what you want to do, right, as a record label. But now the power shift is there and the artist is the CEO. Yeah. And you work for that CEO.
For that CEO.
You know what I mean?
That's a crazy shift. So where do you think Australia's music scene is going to be in the next 3 years? Where do you think it's sort of transitioning to? What do you see? And what do you like sort of in the industry right now?
I mean, I think kind of what we touched on earlier in that, like, the face of music in Australia is changing. And I don't mean that in a, like, cultural or just diversity sense. I mean that in terms of the sounds coming out of Australia, like, you know, the ethnicity of artists coming out of Australia is changing. And I think what you're going to see more and more is those artists exporting to the rest of the world. Yeah. Whether or not someone like really breaks at the level of like a Flume or an Alice in Wonderland
Yeah.
remains to be seen, but inevitably it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we already have a rich culture of artists in Australia being embraced by the rest of the world. Like you look at Tame Impala, you look at going as far back as AC/DC. Like you got artists that are like the biggest things in music at a period in time being from Australia. That's not going to change. What I think is going to change is like, you know, first it was rock music, you know, then it was electronic music or, you know, whatever. There's like 1,000,001 like different genres that have kind of broken out of Australia. But traditionally Australian music was like very rock and pop based. Yeah. Then you had like Kylie Minogue as like super pop. You know what I mean?
Extremes,
Two extremes. Like you had like these rock dogs who were like long hair, spitting on the floor and like just being like absolute animals. Then you had like the pop princess come out of Australia and like blow up internationally. Then you've like up until more recently, you've got artists like Chet Baker, Flume, Alice in Wonderland, Amy Shark, Dean Lewis. These like pop kind of like started with like these electronic acts and then these like new wave of like pop artists breaking. Then you got kids like Rule, who's like 16 and just owning it.
Social media killing, just killing
Social media, like crazy. And I think what you're going to start to see is like another generation coming through. And it's going to be that thing that we spoke about with the UK where like a sound coming out of Australia that's like typically Australian, whereas before it was like typically British with grime.
Exactly.
Is you're going to see someone come out of Australia who's like a hip-hop artist or an R&B artist or a soul artist. And you've already started to see it with like Sampa the Great or Kate or all these amazing artists doing stuff in the UK, selling out shows in the US. You know, Sampa playing her first show in Zambia.
Crazy.
And in Africa this weekend. That. Crazy. It's like, you know, you're literally just watching it in real time. You're like, the news is being reported to us.
And
you know what I mean?
And that's where I'm looking at it from a perspective, like I'm a fan. I love Australian music.
Totally.
Like I'm looking for a perspective. I just see this shit blowing up. And I think one of the biggest things that I think we need to get rid of is I think Australian music, Australian rap music, hip-hop music used to have a really bad stigma. I think people never really appreciated that backpack sort of sound, that Aussie sort of sound. Yeah. But then, and now people seeing, and this is why I honestly reckon it is, now people are seeing the UK scene. I remember when I started listening to the UK scene, people used to be like, these guys sound crazy. They sound mental because their accents are just so weird. Yeah. I mean, if I talk to one of my American friends, they will say the English accent is mental compared to the Australian accent. Yeah. You know what I mean? And vice versa. We're all saying it's all mental. But I think one thing that we got to get rid of is sort of that stigma that just because you have an Australian accent that you can't rap. You know, like, you know, you look up, you know, some artists coming out of like deep Southwest, like that Kid Curve, even Cursor. I remember when Cursor was coming out when I was young, people used to be like, that sounds crazy. Yeah. And now people are just riding on his accent. You know, that Kid Curve is coming out. Elijah Yo has sort of that Australian vibe. You know, it's just a lot of, I think eventually, like you said, that's a good point that you made. I never looked at it in that sort of light, that it's just a matter of time. If the music, and I'm seeing a lot of music starting to come out a lot more consistent, like consistent, you know.
I think the thing is it has to be authentic.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to break through. Like, you know, the Aussie hip hop debate that everyone knows is like Australian accent versus American accent. Yeah. Right? Back in the day when like the Hilltop Hoods, the Fundamentals, the whatevers of the world, you know, all amazing artists and did their thing, and no one can ever take that away from them because they're the biggest artists in Australia still. Yeah. You know, and they're still selling out arena shows. Like, numbers. You can't take that away from them. And none of these new wave have been able to get close to that yet. Yeah. But the thing they did was they were authentically them, right? Straight up. And whether you like that or not, you can't take that away from them. Yeah. So then you fast forward to like 2017, 2018, 2019. Suddenly you've got artists who don't sound Aussie and they're not doing what like this like, you know, classic Oz hop sound. Yeah, yeah. Or being like overly Australian. Forcing it. They're definitely forcing it, yeah. And then like they're not being that, but they're trying to do something else and they're trying to be like, whether it's like being American or being like something different, then there was a backlash to that. So there's always been a backlash in Australia to artists putting on American accent, especially in rap, right? Then in the last 2 years, that conversation has changed because artists who didn't sound super Aussie started to get shine outside
of America. Exactly. Outside of Australia, I mean. That's right.
And so people were like, well, if they're representing Australia, even if they don't sound Australian, they're still Australian.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that a negative thing? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's weirdly come full circle again, where there was this argument of like, oh, but people are rapping with the American accent. People shouldn't rap with that. They should rap at being Australian. But you're like, well, some of these guys, they weren't born in Australia. So why would they sound like super Aussie?
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
But then now it's like, again, like it's constantly changing. Like now you've got guys like 1-4 or like, you know, these guys you're talking about from out west or like Chillin' It or whatever who sound super Aussie or like, you know, or like Islander guys with like kind of Islander inflection and the way that they sort of like portray where they're from and what they stand for. And people in the UK are loving it. Because they're looking at it going, this is different. So them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know,
and that's what it is as well. Like I've noticed also with 1-4 and a lot of Australian artists are doing well abroad is that I think that stigma is dying. I think I think people are looking at these guys and like, wow, is this what they're doing down under? Like, is this really, is this what they're doing? The story hasn't been told. No, people they don't have a Microsoft understanding what's happening in Australia. So when they see, you know, 1-4 or when they see like a Sampha, they're like, well, how did you get a bunch of Pacific Islander guys singing drill? Or she's from Zambia, living in Australia, going back to Zambia and selling out. You know what I mean? It's such an interesting story. It's a mixed pot.
Totally. And I think what it comes down to is that people are fucking with authenticity.
Yeah. Regardless of what you do.
Regardless of where you're from. And regardless of what your accent is. Like, if someone comes up tomorrow and they sound totally American, but they're telling their story, who am I to say that that's not their story?
Yeah.
It's just an inflection on an accent.
Yeah.
But what it comes down to is the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you selling me? Because when I watch a 1-4 video, I'm like, these dudes are about that life.
They're selling it. They're really from Southwest Sydney and they're selling it. Yeah.
And like, you know, and it was the same thing of like a couple of years ago when people discovered Wise and Manu and these other guys.
That's what I was going to ask you.
People were like, these guys are from different places. They're from like, they're not what we've heard before.
Yeah.
And they're doing something that's like super authentic and they're representing where they're from.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So how did you sort of, you were in the scene for quite a long period of time, and then you sort of met Wise and Manu, and that's a certain generation. And, you know, they're killing it, they're doing well. So how did you sort of structure that? You know, how did you sort of get yourself involved in that? Was it sort of you were just working and eventually you met these guys, or were you guys friends for a long period of time?
Yeah, well, funny story actually. I met a lot of those guys actually because, so about 5 years ago, we had this like crazy idea. It was like doing this party was killing. Mm-hmm. Like every month, line out the door. We were like 4 years in of the party already, or 5 years nearly. Yeah. And every month, month in, month out, was like sold out. Like 300, 400 people every month through the door. It was just like, it was the party, right? And we were ambitious.
And which party was this?
This is Halfway Crooks.
Halfway Crooks, yeah.
We were ambitious, and, you know, I was always like, you know, I was just intrigued by, like, because I worked in music at the time. I was at EMI, I was a marketing manager. I was kind of, you know, I was like, what if we did, like, I used to see these kind of like showcases in New York of like Up Next or whatever. Yeah. Or in the UK where they'd like put on these like new artists doing cool stuff. And you'd sort of find that like the party that was doing that, like Places and Faces now, you know, all these people who do it globally, you find that they'll put artists on and a few years later, those are the artists.
That eventually, exactly.
Right? So I was like I was intrigued by that sort of idea. And I was like, okay, we're playing the Drakes, the Lil Waynes, the Travis Scotts, the whoever's of this world, the Waka Flockas, you know, all these artists. We were like Gucci, like we were obsessed with these artists. Yeah. We were like, what's the Australian equivalent to that? And it kind of didn't really exist that much in our mentality. Mm-hmm. But you were like, it's inevitable that how much people are fucking with this music. Yeah. That kids are going to be inspired by it, right? Yeah. So we had this idea and we were like, let's do Halfway Crooks live.
Yeah.
And let's do like a live
session sort of.
Session. And we'll still play what we play in between the sets and before and after it. It'll be a party. But let's put on like 3 artists live.
Damn.
Right?
Yeah.
And we did 2 of them.
Yeah.
And in those 2 sessions, like those 2 parties that we did, the artists we got, which were like just literally by asking people around, like, who are you fucking with? Who are the young artists? Or people we'd seen around.
Yeah.
It was Wise, Manu, Miracle, who's now Blessed.
Yeah.
Still produces under the name Miracle.
Yeah.
Joyride.
Damn.
Monchichi, who's now Jordan Gregg.
Yeah.
And I'm fucking forgetting someone, and I apologize to whoever
Yeah.
And Baby Vino.
Okay, Baby Vino, yeah.
Those 6 artists.
Yeah.
Right? And I saw them all perform, and I was like, most of the time, to be honest, like, were okay.
Yeah. They were developing. They were developing.
They were like young artists finding their lane. Joyride was probably the most, like Joyride and Miracle were probably the most, I guess, like seasoned out of all of them, because like Miracle was signed to Sony. He was already releasing stuff. He was already touring with big artists.
Yeah.
Joyride is part of the One Day crew. So he was already doing stuff with, like, he was DJing for Spit Syndicate.
Yeah.
He was rapping. He was making music. He was singing. He was writing music. And he's like an actual musician as well. So they were probably like the most, I guess, like seasoned on the stage.
Yeah.
But then there were these other artists like Wise and Manu and Miracle, and like Jordan Gregg, Monchichi and Vino, who I was like, I just love what they were doing.
Yeah.
And Wise specifically for me at the time, I was like, this guy is like electric live. Musically, to be honest, and sorry Wise if you watch this, but wasn't really there. Doing it the way I thought he could be doing it.
Yeah.
But on the live sense, he just had something. He had something that, like, when he stepped on stage, people were just like
engaged.
You know?
Yeah.
Manu is so like such a interesting and exciting personality.
Yeah.
But at that stage, he kind of hadn't found his special thing yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I thought he was really special, but he hadn't found his thing yet.
Yeah.
Whereas Wise to me had kind of like, he had sort of almost found it, but just hadn't found the musical aspect of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I developed a relationship with all these guys just through like being around. And then every month they'd come to Halfway Crooks and they'd just be partying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I just party with them and their friends and their girlfriends and, you know, the people they hang out with. And I just developed a relationship with them all.
Yeah.
With Wise, he at the time was being managed by some friends of his who he used to do music with, and all really good guys, got a lot of respect for him. But I think positioning wise, he felt stuck in kind of being positioned in a lane that he didn't want.
Yeah,
and
I get you.
He really wanted to kind of be exposed to like the Triple J audience.
Okay.
Because he was kind of like, you know, I listened to these artists from all over the world.
Yeah.
And I listened to like the Fundamentals and Hilltop Hoods and whatever. Like he kind of listened to all of it.
Yeah.
But he's like, but when I get in the car, I put on my music and then I put on Triple J. And he's like, why can't my music be on Triple J?
Yeah, exactly.
And Triple J Unearthed and that whole platform was just really hitting its strides, but no one had kind of really worked that system well.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of caught up and he's like, hey, can I pick your brain one day? So we caught up for a beer and we were just chatting and he's like, I know you know this lane because that's like your job.
Yeah.
How do I
get into that market?
Yeah. And, you know, after speaking to him for a little while, he's like, will you manage me? And I wasn't a manager.
Yeah.
I was like a marketing manager and a marketing guy in music and a club promoter and a DJ.
On the side, yeah.
On the side. It was like the side hustle.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the last thing I thought I was going to do was take a third side hustle.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I was like, already worked pretty hard.
Yeah.
But I was like, why not?
Yeah.
Let me give this a shot.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's kind of how I got into it. And then like over time, you notice like all these other guys, like Manu kind of like found his lane and he worked that YouTube algorithm and killed it.
That YouTube album was...
Killed it.
Yeah.
Like way ahead of what Wise was doing because Wise we never focused on YouTube because to be honest, he and I, and probably me more so, I didn't see it. I was like...
You didn't see the YouTube?
I saw YouTube, but at the time I saw it more for like either big pop stars or like YouTubers.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see it as like a breaking artist platform.
Yeah.
Even though it was always that, I was like, let's not put our eggs in that basket. And we put our eggs in other baskets.
Yeah.
And, you know, because when we started, you have limited resource and limited time. So you're like, can't do everything. You can't be all things to all people.
Yeah.
So that just wasn't our number. It was our focus, but it wasn't our number one focus.
Yeah.
Whereas like Manu killed that.
Yeah.
Like he just got it, you know? And now, like, you watch, like, 1-4 have, like, taken it to another level.
And you just
and
keep
Cursor
going.
and Chilling It and, like, Leroy and all these people have, like, taken it to other levels because they came at a time where, like, they'd seen other people before them do it.
Take that blueprint.
And then they were like, I'm going to do it to the next level.
Yeah.
And I'm going to work that. You know what I mean? So that was kind of how I got into this world of, like, management. And to be honest, for the last 4 years, I've only managed Wise until recently. He's been the only artist I actually managed. But I work now, since I've been at Future Classic and when I left EMI as a marketing manager, Future Classic is a management-focused company. So now I'm involved in all of our management artists in one way or another. Whether it's like advising on local marketing or strategy or marketing like a tour or, you know, the kind of what's the merch game? What's the social media play? What's the, you know, so now I kind of advise on all of them and dip my toe in on different projects in different ways.
So do you think it's hard to market an Australian artist?
No. I think the world loves and is intrigued by Australia.
Really?
Yeah. Like you go to like a South by Southwest or Great Escape in the UK or one of these conferences and there's heaps of Australian artists over there and there's every manager over there, every booker, like every agent, booker, labels, they're all there going like, what's in the water down there? Honestly, because there's so...
Why is that?
Because think about like Australia as a country is relatively young.
Yep.
We also have a really small population for a ginormous landmass.
Yep.
Right? With that tiny population, there's been an unheralded, like an unprecedented amount of artists who've blown up at a global scale.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Like you think about,
that's true. That's true.
You think about like the UK and how many pop stars and now it's like into grime and whatever.
Now it's blowing up. Yeah.
Then you think about like, okay, how many, like, I'm going to get this totally wrong because it's not my world, but you look at like the Afropop world and you look at like how many artists have gone to the US and blown up, right? The WizKids, the Davidos, like...
Burna Boy, the larger ones, yeah.
There's a bunch of them who've done it, but it's not that many. I mean, it's like it's rapidly growing, don't get me wrong, but it's not that many. And then you look at the population of Africa,
That's
right?
That's the thing. Even if you look at
insane.
Even if you look at WizKid's videos, WizKid had 1 billion streams before he was introduced to the American market.
Totally.
That's crazy to me.
Totally. Then you look at Australia, right? And we are 25 million people, right? And think about how many artists have blown up globally out of Australia, like on a global level.
That's a few.
For the amount of population.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's, like, I say it as like in terms of scale, we are just a nation that has produced some really talented and incredible musicians and continually doing so. So I think the rest of the world is continually looking at us going, what's going on down there? What's the new thing, you know? And that new thing is like, it was rock music, then it was pop music, then it's electronic music. Like the kind of wave of electronic producers that came out of Australia
was stupid.
Crazy.
Was stupid. I went to uni in Macquarie, and this was just like literally like a couple of months before Flume really just took off.
Yeah.
And you know, everyone from Macquarie is pretty much from Manly, from North Shore. And these guys were telling me, man, because if you go to Macquarie, you know, for your first year, every dude that comes from Manly has long hair, right? And you know, so they would tell me
like
all
from Bondi.
it's like like you just, it is what it is. they would talk to me and they would tell me all the time, like, this guy Flume. And I'm like, not really my thing. And the Skins that the album came out, I'm telling you, I've never seen an artist in Australia from like my generation that I've seen an artist blow up like Flume. And then an artist where you have so many different type of people listening to him. Everyone was listening to Flume at one point. So that's crazy. But I think a really big part of it is that now that I think...
Great team behind it.
Yeah, great team.
No, to be honest, I started working at Future Classic 3 weeks before Skin came out. So his first album, the self-titled album, was huge.
Yeah.
Like, had huge singles. He'd already toured the world. And they did an incredible job on that record. And it really brought him into like pop culture, mainstream kind of like eyes and ears.
Yeah.
But the Skin album was like the cultural changing, the turning point of like Australian electronic music.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
And to do it on the scale that he did it on that record.
International. It was international.
Yeah.
But also I think a big part of it is it's a big part of cultural capital. I think that a lot of organizations throughout the world are really trying to invest into music. Yeah. I think, there's a lot of very culturally aware and there's a lot of culturally unaware executives in different positions.
Totally.
And the companies which are winning, which are doing really well right now, especially the international organizations, are the companies with culturally aware, I guess, they understand culture. Sure. They understand that now music is extremely profitable. It's always been profitable, but now it's a main export, it's a main import. You have kids as young as, it's like, what's that song? Old Town Road? Oh, yeah. Have you seen the videos on Instagram where you got like kids that are 9?
Yeah.
How was a 9? And like, because you have kids, with kids, if you buy them a toy, they're going to want all the features. If you buy them an app, they're going to want to continue buying that. Imagine your child is listening to this song. You're going to be streaming that the whole day. You're going to be investing in him and that artist because the kids just want to listen to him over and over again. Yeah. So I think now organizations are starting to realize that, hey, this music thing, we got to start investing in it. We got to start seeing where this can go.
I think that's the next, especially coming out of Australia. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of next phase of like what's going to change this industry. Is the next round of executives coming through and like learning about the inner workings of the industry, not just kind of like being an artist or being a friend of an artist and going like, oh, I'm now a manager. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like it's actually learning the business side of it to how you can actually empower artists to become the next generation of bosses. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
But the thing with that is that I think a lot of people just don't have that information.
Totally.
Like, I watch a lot of Steve Stout. I like the way that he looks at music from a business perspective. It's music, but the way that he's been able to look at it from a business perspective is really interesting to me. But a lot of people just don't have that information. Especially in Australia being such a small industry, a lot of people just don't know how to reach out to people and sort of get that information. So I think it's just more access to information, how people could reach out. But I think the next generation of executives, whether that be a bit older than me or my age, I just think they'll just be a lot more culturally aware. Because I also don't think a lot of these executives I just don't think a lot of them were ready for the Australian music scene to really shoot off. I think they just had, like you said, I think they were adaptive to change the way that they should have been adapted to the change. Yeah.
I mean, I think it depends what genre. Like, if you're talking specifically about, like, kind of hip-hop and R&B and, like, this kind of, I hate the word, like, urban, but, like, the urban kind of culture as it's, like, historically known.
Yeah.
I think, like, you're right. It's definitely, like, the Australian music industry wasn't ready for it. And it does come across as like, I don't know, it can come across as a bit advantageous and also a little bit...
That's the word I'm trying to look for. In a nice way.
But also it can come across as like disingenuous.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, actually that thing over there is working. Let's just pump a bunch of money into it. Sign a big deal and then exploit it.
Yeah.
I think, and it's not about myself at all, but I think there is another generation of executives working in the music industry now who aren't the old dinosaurs who know, for some of the major labels, but who are actually tapped into this market because they've lived it and breathed it their whole life.
I mean, but what you guys are doing at Future for Classic is amazing because you can see that you guys are just genuinely doing
like, it. In this world that we're talking about, like, it's new. It's like B-Wise, this young kid, Jada Woods, like, it's our first foray into that world.
Jada's good. The first time I seen him perform was actually here.
That's how I found him.
No way.
Funnily enough, I wasn't even here.
Are you serious?
But I saw it on like James and Stan and everyone's Instagram stories.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is this kid?
Yeah.
Why don't I know about this? Mm-hmm. Why? Like, because I always pride myself of
getting into the new,
being tapped in.
Yeah,
like even if I'm a bit older and I'm not out all the time, I still know what people are fucking with.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of those things. Same as when I was a DJ, I was inspired by knowing the newest of the new.
Yeah.
You know, I was always like, as a DJ, as a, you know, there's like an educational side to being a DJ, which sounds, you know, really unexciting.
Yeah.
But I would love playing a song at Crooks one month and no one knew it. And then the next month, the whole room is singing it along. Like you were saying with Sorty before.
Yeah.
So when I see something that I don't know, I'm like, oh, let me do a bit of research. Let me find out a bit more about this. And that's what happened with Jada. Where I was like, what's he doing? Who is this? What's the music he's making?
Exactly.
You know, let me find out more about him. And to be honest, when I did that, what I found was like just a really good kid.
Yeah.
Who was like in his bedroom making music, you know, self-taught, had aspirations and big dreams, but probably wasn't there yet.
Need the structure.
But it wasn't even the structure. It's just even musically, it's like doing cool stuff, but he hadn't kind of nailed his own voice yet.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this was a year or so ago, or a bit over. But I was like, but there's something there. I don't know what it is.
But there's something. Something. That's it. And when you say that, I know exactly what you mean. You can't describe it. You can't talk about it. But when you see it, there's something. You already know what it is.
Totally. And also, you know, to be honest, and like, I also come down to like how I vibe with a person generally. Yeah. Like being a manager, for the most part, is you're the therapist, you're their parent, you're the person that's there when like they go through a breakup, you're the person that's there when like they don't get booked on that festival and their friend does. You're there, you know, you're there for like the good times,
and the shit
but
times.
You're also real there for the bad times.
Yeah.
And part of being there for the bad times is also working with people you can talk to.
Yeah.
And you can have a relationship with that is not just, I'm your manager, you're the artist, you're the boss, I work for you.
Yeah.
That's a real contentious relationship and really hard to do business. I want to work with people that I can also have a beer with.
Yeah.
Or I can just sit with and have a conversation with that's not about music.
Yeah.
So when I met Jada, you know, he's a real quiet guy.
Yeah.
For the most part, he's very quiet. He's quite shy. He's quite introverted, but he's also real polite.
Yeah.
And he's well spoken. And he kind of told me straight away what his vision was. Like, he could articulate that to me, even when he doesn't say a lot. He could articulate to me straight away what he wanted to do with his art, with his music, and I felt that like vibe. I was like, oh, I like that energy. I like what you're doing. Are you there yet? No, but let's just keep talking.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like we spoke for a long time before it became anything official. It only became something official this year.
Yeah.
And it's still super early. We haven't actually released anything together. But in the background, we've been working and just getting the music right, getting the vision right. Like, you know, so I think like for me, it comes down to the relationship as much as it comes down to the art. You know, I want to work with people who do make great art, but I want to like be inspired by them. Talk to you and do stuff with you as well. And I think that's also why, like from a management sense, I've treaded like slowly. You know what I mean? Because I've also got this other world where like I work with all these artists who I'm not like their sole manager, but I can like come in and work on their projects and do the marketing on it, or help on the management strategy, or help on the touring, or, you know, I can kind of come in and help on those without having to be like the sole guy who's in charge or, you know, responsible.
Looks like it's a big emotional investment.
It is.
If you want to be a good manager, it's a big emotional investment.
Yeah, and, you know, like I've got a wife and I've got a son.
Yeah.
And I got to balance that. Like, I'm not 18. I'm not out just like, oh, you're out 7 nights a week. I'm going to be out 7 nights a week. No.
You got to balance, yeah.
I got to balance that. Like, I got to be like, hey, you know what? You get my time and you get like my experience and my know-how and everything I want to drop into your project. Mm-hmm. But I also dip out.
Yeah.
And I got like, my weekend might be like, I'm with my family. Mm-hmm. And you need to respect that time as well.
Yeah.
And people I work with, they know that. And I respect their time in the same way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you're young and you're just like hungry, you don't respect anything.
There's no time. There's no time. Yeah.
Time doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're 24/7 on the grind.
Yeah.
I've done that. I did it for too many years. Like, I got grey hairs from it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I just can't do it anymore. I'm not that young anymore. I need to work with people who understand, like, who want to work with me, but also understand
that concept
of time. Like, my time is very valuable.
Yeah.
You know, because if I'm spending it on you, I'm not spending it on my son or my wife. And that is a big learning for me with becoming like a family man.
Yeah.
Is like every hour I dedicate to something else, I'm not dedicating to this. And nothing's more important than this. Mm-hmm. But all that time I'm doing is hopefully building the legacy for that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so it's like, whether it's like putting food on the table financially, or it's just a legacy that they can be proud of.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They need to be mutual. They need to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
They need to work together, you know?
Most definitely. I mean, I always say, if you're working for yourself, you're selfish.
Yeah.
Straight up, that's what I always tell people, man. Regardless of what situation that you're in, you know, we're blessed and fortunate enough to live in a place like Australia where, regardless of where you're from, you can at least have an opportunity to have a better future. If you're not in the best situation, at least, you know, work hard so your kids or your children can be in a better situation. You know, that's what I always say. If you're grinding for yourself, you're selfish.
Yeah.
You know. But anyways, gotta wrap this up.
Cool.
I appreciate that, man.